All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second U.S. History podcast. I think it's our second one of the year, and this is the Age of Imperialism. So let us begin our presentation, and let's start talking about what's going on, right? So imperialism, that is defined as the policy of extending economic, political, or military control over weaker territories around the world. Pretty sure you studied imperialism in the past. I just wanted to make the definition absolutely clear, but we are here today to talk about the age of imperialism in American history. It has been described by many as an aberration, that is, this sudden, singular, short-lived departure from the rest of American history, that we would never have been imperialist, that the USA was anti-imperialist. Is this true? Are our founding principles anti-imperialist? Do we impose imperialism by nature? These are some hypothetical questions I'd like you to think about. Also, is imperialism a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Is it a little bit of both? Especially, back to that question I just asked a minute ago, does it go against some of our founding principles? Think Declaration of Independence. To some degree, it very much does. One of the reasons for calling it an aberration is that a lot of historians, a lot of politicians, a lot of people who follow what goes on in America viewed this period as an embarrassment, as a break from this past of great anti-imperial and anti-colonial tradition. So how do we deal with this? Well, at the time, in the press, I'm going to show you 4 or 5 political cartoons that are all quite critical. There's going to be a huge movement opposing this imperialism, but there's also plenty who are supporting it. So Uncle Sam's at the dinner table. Well, I hardly know which one to take first. He's getting ready to order what he wants for dinner, a little bit of Cuba steak, Puerto Rico pig, or some Philippine floating island. We have a couple different takes on this imperialism. Teddy Roosevelt with his big stick approach, the policeman of the world, being involved in world politics all over the place. Or we have more of our Woodrow Wilson, the professor. Here he is trying to teach his students, but notice the unruly kids in the front are all these new additions. They're not like the good little boys and girls of Texas and California and Arizona in the background. Notice they don't even let the poor little Chinese student come into the classroom. Everybody else was allowed in, but that was because of the Chinese Exclusion Act at the time. Here's Uncle Sam throwing his little America flag darts. Again, these are all cartoons that were in various press outlets from the time period. 10,000 miles from tip to tip, showing the American eagle and our new empire. Back to what we're talking about. These questions I want you to be thinking about, and our founding principles and so on and so forth. The next question is there really a difference between the expansionism of the 1800s and the imperialism of the late 18 and early 1900s? The key difference, of course, is that the expansionism is on the continent, and then we get the whole continent, and then we start taking islands like the Philippines and Hawaii and Guam and Puerto Rico, and we get involved all over the world, and we'll get into that. But other than that geographic distinction, is there another difference? It's something I would like you to think about and be ready to discuss in class. Why does this happen? Why does USA join, as some have called it, the imperialist club? Because who was getting super imperialistic at the time? Yes, if you said Europe, you were right. And who were the champion imperialists? The 2 greatest imperialists at the time were England and France. So you've got a little bit of maybe international peer pressure going on. Here's a bunch of European world powers and Uncle Sam. They're playing this game and they're getting ready to play cards. And Uncle Sam wants to get involved. He doesn't want to be the only one left out. A couple of key reasons that have been cited for why we join imperialism at this time. The first one is the European scramble. This is the famous scramble for Africa. This was the time period in the 1890s when Europe was divvying up Africa. We didn't get involved in that, but there were those who were looking, saying, well, wait a minute, if the Europeans are splitting up the world, is it at our risk that we don't get involved, right? There's this idea of national security. Maybe it's for our nation's security to start conquering faraway lands. I put the phrase real or perceived here in the notes, though, because I asked the question, and many historians have asked the question, we might think it makes us safer, but does it in the long run really make us safer when we conquer other countries and other lands? And one of the fundamental problems there is what happens is they start fighting for their freedom, and look what happens to the French, look what happens to the Spanish when their colonial territories start demanding freedom. But we'll talk about that, of course, much later. Another possible reason for joining at the imperial period is this clear idea of military strength and expansion. A very famous book came out in 1890 by Alfred T. Mahan called The Influence of Sea Power on History, where he argues whoever controls the seas controls the world. And in the new modern era, we still have major navies and they have a different kind of need for energy. In the old wars, of course, you weren't fighting for energy. The naval ships were sailboats. But now they need coal. And so we need deep sea ports and we need coaling stations. And so the Pacific is going to become very important. If you want to cross to China, which is a major market, you need places to stop on the way. And so you'll notice Hawaii right there in the middle, and other territories as well that we're going to be talking about. Let's talk about economics and expanding markets. This is the graph that shows U.S. foreign investment, how much our big businesses were involved in businesses around the world. And it literally is exploding at this time period. And we already have talked in this last little bit of the unit about how close big business was to the government. And so if it's in their favor to do something, maybe they're going to push for it. Maybe they're going to lobby for it. And they have a lot of pull and a lot of sway in the government, right? So you see the chart on the left that shows exports and imports rising quite quickly. In the middle there, you see an advertisement from Singer Sewing Machine. The Singer Sewing Machines around the world. They're selling their machines on every continent. And so it's in their interest that we have better trade with every part of the world. As related to this theme, number 3, is also the idea of labor tensions, right? The strikes we've been studying. There's so much violence going on that there are those who have theorized that it was in the interest of the government to distract people from the tensions and the things they were upset about. What really brings people in a country together better than a war? Teddy Roosevelt famously said, what this country needs is a great war. And that was right before the 1898 Spanish-American War. He got his wish. So that's another way of looking at it. And then we have to really also look at number 4, which is this idea of cultural and social superiority, otherwise known as the white man's burden. And we're going to divide this into 2. The first one being the missionaries. There was a huge surge of missionary movements, of missionaries going abroad to harvest new souls, to bring the word of God in the Bible. This is a great cartoon sort of mocking the role of Uncle Sam on the backs of and on the shoulders of the people carrying him. But this mockery is not so far from the reality when you look at a picture of American missionaries doing their work in China in 1905. Related but different, we have social Darwinist thinking. This was really one of the key ideas of the time, this idea of a hierarchy of races. Clearly, at that time, we believed that the white Anglo-Saxon was superior and everybody was below us, and that we actually had a responsibility. It's been referred to as the white man's burden. You can see here the young, strapping American carrying the savage up the hill to civilization and society. And at great risk, you can see those who have died along the way as he is climbing. And that phrase, white man's burden, comes from this famous Rudyard Kipling poem from 1899, where he talks about this idea, take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed, go bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and wild, your new-caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. This idea that the people that we're going to conquer, that last phrase, they're half devil, they're half child, it's our responsibility to suffer and struggle and bring them civilization and society. One final cause that is often talked about is the idea of yellow journalism. That's this not so honest reporting that is used to sell papers, sensationalism, exciting stories, making their war, literally. The 2 most famous owners of newspapers at the time, Pulitzer and Hearst, who were becoming multimillionaires, had the idea of whatever sells is what we'll print. In fact, Hearst once bragged that he could create a war with his newspapers. And so here you see them building the blocks that lead to war with their newspapers, right? So what is going on in this time period? What is actually happening? What are the methods used to achieve the goals of the imperialist era? The first method really is formal imperialism. What does that mean, formal imperialism? It means an actual physical presence in the country in question, right? A political and military takeover, all right? And there's 2 categories. There's 2 lists of countries. Places like Hawaii, Guam, and Puerto Rico, we will actually take over. We will occupy with military and with governing structures. Then there are the other places where we simply overthrow the government. Maybe we take over, and maybe we don't. Maybe we let somebody else take over, but we've overthrown a government that we don't like. And that list is quite long. Hawaii, Cuba, Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guatemala, Iran, Vietnam, Chile. We'll look at those later and how those all happened. This little map is just showing you American military interventions in Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, and Nicaragua, and so on. And you can see just how many there were in that 1890 to 1920 time period. The other kind of imperialism is what we call informal imperialism, and that's when you dominate through treaties and policies without actually going over and occupy. And China is the famous example of that. We'll get to that one later, but it was called the open door policy. We were going to open China to all of European and American trade, but we wanted to be the ones who were the guardians of the gate. The reality of the time period is that it really is this imperialistic period, right? Americans often think of our history as one of isolationism. We don't deal with the rest of the world, but there's something of a myth to that. From 1798 to 1895, how many times has our army or our military been used to intervene in other countries? Write down your guess on the piece of paper. How many do you think it is? 5, 10, 15, 20? The correct answer is 103 times. Right? All of these places, we become a Pacific power. Alaska, the Johnson Atoll, Midway, the Hawaiian Islands, the Wake Islands, Guam, the Philippines. Yes, we took over the Philippines at one point, but we will get into all of that shortly. This brings us to Hawaii, but we're not going to talk about that now because in class on Tuesday, we'll be getting in depth into Hawaii. Thanks for listening. Make sure you go back and get all the notes filled in, and those will be collected in class. Thank you very much. See you soon.